1962, Claude Lévi-Strauss wrote one of the most influential anthropology books of the 20th century, The Savage Mind. This book challenges a deeply rooted assumption in Western thought that so-called primitive people think in a fundamentally different, relational way than modern societies. Lévi-Strauss argues the opposite. The human mind is structurally the same everywhere. The difference is not in intelligence. It is in the materials and systems through which thought operates. This book is foundation for structuralism, a movement that also influenced the philosophy, linguistics, literary theory, and even architecture. To understand the savage mind, we must first understand the thinker behind it. Claude Lévi-Strauss was born in 1908 in Brussels and grew up in France in a family of artists and intellectuals. His early life was shaped by philosophy, art, and literature, rather than anthropology. He originally studied philosophy at the University of Paris and initially planned to become a philosopher and a teacher. However, in the 1930s, he traveled to Brazil to teach sociology at the University of São Paulo. This experience changed everything. In Brazil, Lévi-Strauss encountered indigenous communities in the Amazon and began conducting field work among tribal societies. For the first time, he observed the cultures that Western society had long labeled as primitive. But instead of seeing them as underdeveloped or irrational, he saw something different. He saw structure. He saw logic. He saw systems of thought as sophisticated and complex as Western philosophy. During World War II, Lévi-Strauss fled Nazi-occupied France and moved to the United States, and where he worked at the New School for Social Research in New York. There he encountered structural linguistics, especially the work of Roman Jacobson, which deeply influenced his thinking. From linguistics, Lévi-Strauss developed a radical idea. Human culture operates like language. Just as language has grammar and structure, culture has hidden structures that shape how humans think. This became the foundation of structural anthropology. His major works include The Savage Mind, Structural Anthropology. Through these works, Lévi-Strauss transformed anthropology from descriptive field work into theoretical and philosophical discipline. He wasn't just studying the tribes, he was studying human thought itself. In A Savage Mind, he presents one of his most important arguments. The so-called primitive thinking is not primitive at all. It is structured, logical, and creative. So what does a savage mean? The central argument of the savage mind is the so-called primitive or savage thinking is not irrational. It is structured and systematic. Lévi-Strauss criticizes the Western idea that indigenous societies think emotionally or superstitiously. Instead, he argues that their thinking is based on classification and observation of the natural world. Traditional societies categorize plants, animals, seasons, and natural phenomena in highly detailed ways. Their knowledge of nature is often more precise than modern scientific classification in certain contexts. The savage mind, therefore, is not chaotic, it is analytical. It organizes the world through symbolic relationships. Lévi-Strauss famously argues the savage mind thinks through concrete objects rather than abstract concept. This means knowledge is embedded in myth, rituals, and symbols rather than equations and theories. But both systems aim to understand the world. This creates a radical conclusion. Western science is not the only varied form of the knowledge. It is simply one with structuring reality. The savage mind represents another equally structured way. This idea challenges the hierarchy between modern and traditional societies. It suggests that all human cultures share the same cognitive structure. The difference lies only in how knowledge is expressed. The other famous ideas in the savage mind is the concept of the Bricoleur. Lévi-Strauss introduced the Bricoleur as a metaphor for how traditional societies think and create the knowledge. A bricoleur is someone who builds using whatever materials are available. Instead of designing from scratch like an engineer, the bricoleur improvises, reuses, and recombines existing elements. Lévi-Strauss writes that the bricoleur works with a finite set of the material which is always heterogeneous. This means bricoleur doesn't invent new materials. He rearranges existing ones. He adapts, he transforms, he recombines. The key idea is that traditional societies think like bricoleurs. They construct the knowledge from a myths, symbols, rituals, and natural observations. They do not create scientific theories in a modern sense, but they build complex systems of meaning using what is available in the cultural environment. Lévi-Strauss contrasts the bricoleur with the engineer. The engineer works with abstract concepts and standardized materials. The bricoleur works with concrete objects and lived experiences. But this does not mean the bricoleur is inferior. In fact, Lévi-Strauss argues that both are forms of human intelligence. The difference is not intelligence. The difference is method. The bricoleur represents a mythical and symbolic mode of thinking, while the engineer represents a scientific and analytical mode of thinking. This distinction is important because it challenges the Western assumption that scientific thinking is superior. Instead, Lévi-Strauss suggests that all human cultures construct the knowledge through the structured process. This idea has had an enormous influence on fields such as philosophy, anthropology, and even architecture and design. Because architecture itself often operates like bricolage. Designers reuse historical references, materials, and cultural symbols to create a new spatial meanings. In this sense, the architect can also be understood as a bricklayer. Another major chapter in the savage mind deals with totemism. In classical anthropology, totemism was often misunderstood as a primitive religious belief. It was assumed that tribal societies worship animals or natural objects as sacred beings. Lévi-Strauss rejects this interpretation. He argues that totemism is not primarily about a religion. It is about a classification. Totemism is a system that organizes social groups through symbolic relationships with animals or natural elements. For example, a tribe may associate itself with a wolf, an eagle, or a planet. But this doesn't mean they worship the animal. Instead, the animal becomes a symbolic category that helps structure social identity and relationships. Totemism becomes a way of organizing differences. It creates distinctions between groups. It establishes social order. Lévi-Strauss famously argues that animals are not chosen because they are good to eat. They are chosen because they are good to think with. This means animals function as conceptual tools. They help humans structure relationships and understand social organization. Totemism therefore becomes a symbolic language. It is not superstition. It is a logical system of classification. This reinterpretation changed anthropology completely. Instead of seeing trivial societies as irrational, Lévi-Strauss showed that their symbolic systems operate with internal logic and coherence. Totemism became evidence that human thought everywhere is structured and systematic. Lévi-Strauss also discusses about history and structure. He explores the relationship between historical change and underlying cultural structures. Western thought often emphasizes history, progress, and evolution, development over time. Societies are seen as moving forward through stages, primitive to modern, traditional to industrial, simple to complex. But Lévi-Strauss challenges this linear view. He argues that beneath historical changes, there are deep structures that remain constant. These structures exist in methods, language, and social organization. They shape how humans think and interpret the world. History may change surface conditions, but structural patterns remain. This leads to the key distinction. History focuses on event and change. Structure focuses on underlying systems and relationships. Lévi-Strauss suggests that anthropology should focus more on structure than on historical narratives. Because structure reveals universal patterns of human thought. This idea connects strongly with structuralism in linguistics and philosophy. Just as language has deep glamour beneath spoken words, culture has deep structures beneath historical events. This perspective shifts attention from individual events to systematic relationships, from stories to patterns, from history to structure. However, this approach has also been criticized. Some scholars argue that focusing too much on structure ignores historical reality and social change. It may reduce culture to abstract systems and overlook politics, power, and material conditions. But still, Lévi-Strauss's contribution is significant. He shows that human culture cannot be understood only through history. It must also be understood through structure. This tension between history and structure remains one of the most important debates in the social theory today. And together, these chapters form the core of the Lévi-Strauss philosophy. The Bricoleur shows how humans construct knowledge. The savage mind shows that all cultures think logically. Totemism shows the symbolic systems are structured classification systems, and history and structure show the culture operates through deep universal patterns. Taken together, these ideas create a powerful conclusion. Human thought is fundamentally structured, regardless of the culture, geography, or historical development. This challenges the hierarchy between modern and primitive societies. It also transforms anthropology into a philosophical investigation of human cognition. Lévi-Strauss does not simply study tribes. he studies the structure of the human mind. And through this, the savage mind becomes not only an anthropological text, but a philosophical work about humans understand the world. So the impact of the savage mind extended far beyond anthropology. It influenced literary theory, philosophy, psychoanalysis, and architecture. Structuralism shaped the thinkers like Leonardo Barthes and later debates involving Jacques Derrida. In design fields, the idea that meaning emerges from relational systems rather than isolated objects became central. For architects, this can be transformative. A building is not just a form, it is part of a system of differences, urban, cultural, symbolic. Design becomes an act of recombination within the constraints. In a sense, architecture is Bricoleur work. So let's summarize the core insights. The human mind is universal. There is no hierarchy of intelligence between cultures. Primitive thought is illogical. It classifies and structures the world legally. And Bricoleur recombines existing materials. Creativity often emerges from the constraint. Meaning arises through difference. Binary opposition structure culture. Nature becomes a model for thinking society. Totemism is intellectual organization, not superstition. So why this book still matters? The savage mind challenges a comfortable myth. The modern scientific thinking represents the peak of human rationality. Lévi-Strauss shows that all scientists think structurally. They simply use different symbolic materials. In today's world, shaped by remix culture, digital recombination, and interdisciplinary design, the Bricoleur feels more relevant than ever. We are constantly assembling meaning from fragments. For architects and urban thinkers, this resonates strongly. Cities are not engineered from nothing. They are layered structures of inherited systems. Understanding them requires structural reading, and designing within them requires Bricoleur intelligence. Thank you for watching, and hope this summary helps you, and hope you have the opportunity to read the actual text and learn more about it. And still, we just halfway up the ladder of the knowledge of all of architecture, art, philosophy, and design. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.